For starters, let me say that it is a great joy and privilege for me to be at this event, at this forum, representing the Ministry of Environment and Energy and our own Minister, Mr. Skuras, and participating at a panel that tackles such an important issue as is the climate crisis. It is called the crisis of our era. The primary sector is one of the most important sectors of economic activity, both for the European Union and our country. Nowadays, challenges that farmers face, and I'm going beyond challenges that deal with maintaining productivity, being able to continue to produce interesting products and maintain biodiversity in the environment. They also have a huge new challenge, a challenge linked to climate change, to climate crisis. This has been experienced practically in the past few years. We've got the impact from global warming that has made itself known. We see how precipitations have increased. We see how urban planning, rural planning have changed, especially within the urban areas. Planning has changed because flash floods would happen once every 50 years, whereas nowadays we see that flash floods have become repetitive, recurrent events within a time frame of 3 to 5 years. So we need to manage that phenomenon. And we also see that all of that has a huge impact on the agricultural sector's productivity, including the breeding farming sector. What is also equally important, what we have acknowledged, is that the climate crisis has an impact on different areas. In some areas, for example, Northern Europe, it may even have a beneficial impact. So we see that in some areas, the conditions to grow specific plants and to prolong cultivation and crop yield is benefited. Whereas in the Central Europe and Southern Europe, there is a reduction of the yield, of the agricultural yield, and in some cases there is also a phenomenon of desertification, which is very important and is happening in our country. Climate change also changes plant physiology, productivity, as I mentioned before, including traditional crops, the suitability of environmental conditions with respect to specific types of crops. We used to be able to grow several crops in specific settings, and now those settings can no longer support these crops, which means that we need to change production in that area. There are shifts in productivity, there are shifts in the in how bees affect and pollinate the various crops. So there's a new demand for new measures that definitely need to include innovation, results of research, and of course strategic partnerships, synergies, along with research institutions that can lead us to innovative methodologies and technologies. The agricultural sector contributes to climate change, contributes through its greenhouse gas emissions, and is considered part of the problem behind the climate crisis, which means that it also needs to be a part of the solution. In order to mitigate climate change, in order to bring down emissions and pollutants, we need to turn to a sustainable and climate-neutral agriculture, both in the sense of crop farming and breeding, cattle breeding. And this touches on the ability of Greek companies not only to remain competitive but also to survive within the international arena. On behalf of the EU, there is a new strategy on forests with a 2030 horizon, protecting primary and old forests, restoring and rehabilitating forests and ensuring their sustainability. However, it is also extremely important if we are to meet an important target for the EU as well, to attain climate neutrality as EU by 2050. And on the other hand, we also have the 2030 objective to bring down pollutants to a reduction by 25% by 2030. This is a highly ambitious goal, and it has been upped recently. In order to achieve it, all sectors of the economy, the Greek economy included, need to be able to implement the indicated measures. So what we named sustainable agriculture, sustainable cattle breeding is what we are aiming for. Yes, we have come up with a new law on the climate, and this new framework corroborates the EU will to reach climate neutrality by 2050, and there is this interim goal of 2030 that may seem distant, but it's not. And in Greece we also have the National Plan on Climate and Energy. And given that the objectives for pollutants and emissions have been revised, our plan also sets forth specific plans and methodologies to attain all objectives. And our policy on energy is very important. We need to change, and this is obvious, the energy mix in Greece, and we need to turn towards high percentages of renewable energy sources use. As of this year and up until 2030, we need to double the percentage of RES in our energy mix. The EU, as well as a new framework for obtaining these objectives, and in conjunction with the European law on climate, is what we call Fit for 55. All actions, all policies that need to be taken on by the political leadership, following specific pathways that will allow us all to obtain the climate objective by 2030. More specifically, we need to change our entire legislative framework in many sectors within the EU, and we also need to have 14 legislative acts at a pan-European level that will need to be implemented and transfused into the national legislative framework. This all means that our country is faced with a huge challenge. This challenge being something that affects the country as a whole, as well as each individual aspect of our economy. And of course, a very important aspect of our economy is agriculture and the agri-food sector, where we need to bring down pollutants, especially within a specific framework, so that we will be able to meet the objective of climate neutrality by 2050 and the interim 2030 objective. I would like to point out that the Ministry of Environment and Energy in Greece, and this is important, and I'm coming to the conclusion of my introductory remarks, has already proceeded to draft a bill of law on energy. We are among the first countries, it has been announced by the Prime Minister himself, that will have a national climate law. What is that? entail? It is the entire framework that I mentioned before that will allow us to meet the objectives on climate neutrality. So within the framework of this national climate law, we will be enabled to set interim objectives going beyond the 2030 and 2050 objectives, to have an interim objective of 2040 with an horizon of 2040, and also a complete shift in different operations. And here the carbon budgets will come into play and play a major role in various aspects of Greek economy, including agriculture, including the agri-food sector. We will have a carbon budget based on the carbon emissions that are anticipated. There will be an observatory, a climate change observatory, which is also foreseen and stipulated under the climate law, in order to make sure to monitor that all carbon dioxide emission standards and regulations are met. In conclusion, I would like to say that we are faced with a major challenge, and this major challenge is to change the way our economy operates, turn towards an economy wherein the environment plays a key part for all economic sectors, and we definitely and above all need to turn towards those aspects that are included under the national plan, enabling circular economy, allowing us to move from the current model to a more circular model, and enabling us all to turn to what we need to focus on. We need to direct ourselves towards a renewable and sustainable economy, utilizing the instruments afforded to us by technology. Thank you very much for your attention.